The thing is that not only us believe that, Iqrit and Biram give hope to other people from other villages do. And, since we started the last movement in 2012, it really gave hope to a lot of people. Like we got the media, like the Palestinian media coming every day to talk to us like, oh my God, this is the first time that a new group of youth just decide to go back to their ancestral village and live in it because this is what they want and this is what return is.
On March 7th and 8th, our friends at Telos are organizing a solidarity and action gathering in New Orleans. It is intended for peacemakers, pastors, artists, and anyone else who wants to participate in building power in the movement for dignity and human rights in Palestine and Israel. We will hear from and be led by the next generation of Palestinian Christian leaders who are challenging the American church to own their responsibility and opportunity to participate in the possibility of justice, rather than remaining indifferent in the face of violence and genocide. And most importantly, we will strategize together how to reach each of our own contexts while growing movement-wide action. I will be there, and I would love to see you there as well. Join the movement of leaders choosing to speak truth to power with a bold and unified voice in defense of the dignity of our Palestinian siblings and on behalf of the future of all in Palestine and Israel. Register for this gathering at telosgroup.org/gathering 2025, telosgroup.org/gathering 2025.
As we've already discussed, activism takes many forms, and today we will be focusing on nonviolent resistance through land-based activism, the ongoing effort to reclaim and maintain presence in dispossessed communities. I'm joined by Amir Toumie to discuss his village, Iqrit, a Palestinian Christian village whose residents were forcibly displaced in 1948. Amir shares how activism in Iqrit is deeply rooted in faith, legal advocacy, and continuous presence in the land, making it a powerful example of nonviolent resistance and perseverance. As for our Patreon supporters, Amir also reflects on the unseen personal and communal sacrifices that come with this kind of activism, the daily challenges of pushing for change, the impact on families, and the resilience needed to keep going. He shares how faith, collective unity, and common decision-making sustain activists through moments of doubt and conflict. Amir is a political and social activist for Palestinian liberation and rights in both the Palestinian communities in 48 and Chicago. As an activist, Amir co-founded and served as president of Haifa Youth Movement and as a member of the youth movement in his displaced Palestinian village of Iqrit. While engaging in activism in all fields, he has earned a bachelor's degree in political science and Asian studies from the University of Haifa and a dual master's degree in international relations and diplomacy from the University of Haifa and the University of Warsaw in Poland. Amir is now a fifth-year PhD candidate of political science in the University of Illinois at Chicago, UIC, and a board member of Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, in his university, UIC. If you believe in the importance of these conversations, please consider supporting us on Patreon to help us continue this work. As for now, I invite you to listen to this episode where you will learn a lot, not only about Iqrit, but about other villages and the whole concept of nonviolent resistance in Palestine up until today. So let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our Faith and Activism series within our Across the Divide podcast. Today, I'm very happy to be here with Amir. Hi, Amir. How are you doing?
Hi, Abeer. Thank you so much for hosting me today.
We are very happy to have you here. We'll be discussing one of the topics we haven't actually addressed, but it's one of, I think, very important cases that perhaps I'm not sure, but it feels like most of the American audience, and I believe our listeners, our audience, don't really know a lot about. So it would be very important to talk about it both in an educational, to discuss, the legal aspects, the cultural, everything related to the whole issue of Iqrit. As mentioned in the intro, Amir is from there, and also Amir is one of the activists about this issue. So we're really happy to have you here. To start off, I would like, to discuss the story in general. Mm-hmm. So if you can walk us through the story of Iqrit from 1948 until today, how has the legal battle for the right to return shaped the community's understanding of justice and resistance?
Sure. So, first of all, thank you for having me here again. I'm very happy. I've had a lot of chances to talk about Iqrit in the last few years, especially since we started the last, return movement in 2012. But this is another one. We want to keep telling the story. So thank you for giving me this platform. So regarding Iqrit, Iqrit is basically one of the 530 Palestinian villages that were displaced in 1948 by the Zionist forces and by the state of Israel afterwards. It's a small Palestinian Christian village in the northern Galilee region of Palestine, so very close to the border with Lebanon. And the village in 1948 had around 450 residents. And most of the people, they lived their daily lives. They worked as farmers in the local lands. Some of them were merchants, some of them were teachers. But yeah, the life in Iqrit was in every other village, in the region in general. So what happened is that the story specifically with Iqrit started in late October 1948. So that was around 6 months after the declaration of independence of Israel, but still during the Nakba, because the Nakba itself ended in 1949 after displacing all the other villages. The Israeli occupation army entered our village as part of Operation Hiram to occupy the Galilee region of Palestine. And since the people of the village did not own any weapons, and the Arab armies were not even in the region to help them resist, the people decided to give in to the occupying power in order to spare the village and to spare the lives of the people there. So, the people were reluctant, and they had to accept the army into the village at some point. So they did, and then the army ordered the people of Iqrit to leave the village for 2 weeks for their own safety, since the war was still raging around. So the commanders gave a promise to the people of the village that they will make them leave for 2 weeks, and then they will be able to come back after 2 weeks. This was the main promise. So the people were put on buses, and they were sent to another village in the Galilee called Rami. And 2 weeks after that, the people asked to return to village as promised, but the army kept delaying their return. And at the same time, the people of Iqrit were living in very dire conditions in Rami. Imagine taking a whole village, a population of a village, and putting it on another population of another village. So it got to a situation where around 5 families were living in the same houses for a very long time. As the return of the people was delayed by the army again and again. But 6 months later, people were still in Rami. The people of Iqrit, as Israeli citizens, they decided to appeal to the Israeli Supreme Court, demanding to return to their village. So 3 years later, in July 1951, in a historic ruling, the Israeli Supreme Court permitted the people of Iqrit to return to their homes. In addition to the people of Kufr Bir'am, which is another displaced village in the Galilee, very close to Iqrit. So it permitted them to go back to their homes, reclaim their lands, and rebuild the village. However, and in order to prevent the implementation of the ruling, the army then declared Iqrit a military closed area. So the people could not actually implement the ruling and go back to the village. And in the same year, in order to finish the case completely, we can say, on Christmas Eve of 1951, the army bombarded the village and demolished the village homes. So nowadays, the only structures that are still standing in Iqrit are the village church, the Church of Our Lady, and the village cemetery. The rest of the houses and shops and the structures and all the buildings of the village were completely demolished by the army on that Christmas Eve. So along the years after that, a lot of Iqritians stayed in Rami, but others started scattering around Palestine. My family, for example, went to Akka first. and then we went to Haifa. I was born in Haifa. My family still lives in Haifa, but I am internally displaced. As I was supposed to be born and lived in Iqrit my whole life. But yeah, but most people stayed close by. So most people stayed in the Galilee and the area around Iqrit. So the people did turn into refugees in their own homeland, but the demand to return never died, even after 76 years, even more than 76 years. So from that period, from the 50s until the 1970s, Iqrit stayed as a military closed area. And until then, the people were allowed to visit the village only on Israeli Independence Days. So here you can see the irony where Palestinians that were displaced by Israel are supposed to be happy on Independence Day only because Israel permits them to visit their village this one day a year. But they're sad at the same time because, we cannot really celebrate the independence of Israel. So during these years, also the village lands were confiscated, except, of course, for the church and the cemetery, which still belong to the Greek Melkite Catholic Church administration in Haifa. And the rest of the lands of Iqrit, which were around 6,000 acres, they were confiscated by the state, and now they are state-owned, but the state rents them out to Jewish settlers and Jewish farmers and people who are not from the region, are not from the area, who use our lands, but we cannot use them. So even when we are on our ancestral lands, a lot of times we do have problems with the local farmers that do not want us to be there. But that's another issue that's connected to the whole case. Anyway, the people continued to petition the Israeli government to fulfill their promise and implement the court ruling and allow them to return and rebuild the village. And all this while the people kept the community life alive in Iqrit as their ancestral homelands. So since the 90s, we started organizing summer camps in Iqrit. I grew up in these summer camps, learning about the village history and about our struggle and what we want to do and how we want to return. A lot of people also just decided to stay in the church. The only place that you can stay in Iqrit is the actual building there. So a lot of people went and stayed in the church, on random nights. We also had a lot of events and festivals, but like the most important thing was the religious services at the same time. We have masses in Iqrit every month now. We go up to the church and we pray together. But at the same time, we also have the burials in the cemetery. So this leads to another situation where we are allowed to die in Iqrit, but we are not allowed to live there. We're allowed to be buried in the cemetery, but we cannot live a day in our lives lawfully under Israel in Iqrit, which is another funny story. But this is our lives as Palestinians. We have to go with it, I guess. So the last big development in our story was in 2012. So after the summer camp of 2012, a group of youth from the third generation since the Nakba of Iqrit, including me, we decided to stay on the village grounds even after the summer camp ended and we were supposed to go back to our homes in Haifa and other places. So we decided to stay on the village grounds, plant trees, and establish our new lives in Iqrit, regardless of the political situation and everything else. And truly, until today, there are members of our group that are still living in the church in Iqrit and keeping the dream of a return alive. Not me, unfortunately, because I had to come to the US and work on my PhD. But whenever I go back home to Palestine, I always go to Iqrit and spend a lot of days there, to get back to it at some point. So as a group, we decided to take this step in order to challenge the state and reclaim our ownership of the land and space and create facts on the ground and tell, the state of Israel or anybody who supports the state of Israel that we are not waiting for the state of Israel or anybody else to give us approval to go to our lands and reestablish our lives there. So we did that anyway. But during all these years, we were challenged by the Israel Land Administration, which is the official Israeli agency that administers state-owned lands. And since the lands of Iqrit were confiscated, they're the ones who administer these lands, and they don't want us to be over there. So they confiscated a lot of our belongings as well, and they uprooted our trees. But we're determined to continue the struggle, and our lives in Iqrit also included sustaining the community life in the village. So we organized more festivals and more public events, and we greet visitors and people who come to learn about the village story and, our struggle for return and things like that. So this has been the situation in Iqrit for many years now, and also since 2012, with the Israelis resisting our demands, to return every chance that they get. But, as Palestinians, especially Palestinian Christians in the Holy Land, we don't really lose hope. So we are continuing, to do whatever we can do on our village lands until the day of return comes. And this is what's going on.
Yeah, and seeing that the 2 weeks became 76 years and more, and you said it, and that is one of the things that we keep talking about, sumud, steadfastness, and how Palestinians really are characterized by this. I think Iqrit and the fact that the third generation is still aware of the situation, is still working towards changing the situation, that is one of that's a big manifestation of who we are and of what we really, hope and dream to achieve. And as you said, we not losing hope, even though everything around us keeps, pushing us back and making us feel that it's not going to happen. But it's just the fact, seeing all these people still working towards that, I think is incredible. I think it's a great, it's inspiration for many people. And I just wanted to stop on the point. Okay, so we were talking about Christmas Eve. So it's not just any time especially for a small Palestinian Christian village. It is Christmas Eve when children were just supposed to be, celebrating, going around, having fun, families just gathering over, a feast, as we always do. Do you think that was also something that happened by, just a coincidence? And the other thing, putting all of that into consideration, what is exactly, you would say, the unique thing about Iqrit and maybe Kufr Bar'am among the 530 villages that were expelled in the Nakba?
Yeah. So about the Christmas Eve, I totally do not believe that it was a coincidence. I think it was a deliberate, attack, and they decided to destroy the village on one of our most holy nights, especially for of course, all Christians in the world, but especially for Christians in the Holy Land. So instead of, us being able to get normal gifts that would make us happy and that would make our kids happy, Israel decided to give us the gift of demolition on Christmas Eve. And I think I think that's deliberate. They wanted to send a message saying that, we don't care about your beliefs. We don't care where you come from. We don't care about your connections to this land. We are going to be taking control of these lands and occupying you and destroying your home. Doesn't matter what happens, in order for us to fulfill our national goal of establishing a state. But yeah, anyway, regarding Iqrit and Kufr Bar'am and other villages. So as I said before, the ruling from 1951 also referred to Kufr Bar'am, another displaced Palestinian Christian village that's also very close to the border, actually half an hour from Iqrit by car. And it was the first time that Israel as a state and, state institutions like the Supreme Court of Israel actually gave a ruling permitting the right of return for Palestinians in Palestine. And this is why it's such a big deal, for us as people from Iqrit and Bar'am, but also I think for Palestinians around the world and people in general. However, of course, a lot of people did not really expect the occupying state to actually implement this decision, and this is what actually happened. The government and the army, executive and the army, they never wanted the people that they displaced to return to their own places, especially if they were Palestinians. The whole goal was ethnic cleansing and trying to get as many Palestinians out of Palestine as possible, including us. Even if we were citizens, they just did not want us to be in our ancestral homes and ancestral lands. So they decided. So they, tried as much as they can to make it hard for us to come back. So they were not going to implement this decision, but it did give hope to some people that they were like, you know what, the Supreme Court actually gave us this decision, so we're going to be continuing this. And I think this is like one of the secret of like, you know, the success of Iqrit and Bir'am. A lot of people, especially, you know, after the establishment of the state, you know, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, a lot of people actually believe that, okay, the government like will implement the decision at some point. But, you know, now we know the truth. This is one. I think number two, you know, the like reason number two that makes Iqrit and Bir'am like more special is like the actual community collective life that survived in the villages. You know, like we kept holding masses, we kept bringing people to Iqrit. Like there's an actual physical space where we can bring people to, and they can see their land and feel their land and stay there and breathe the air and sleep under the stars, and, you know, everything that's connected to actually to everything that is home. And yeah, and you know, the most basic thing is having this physical space where we can organize and we can stay, and we actually have a building. You know, it's the church. It's like the center of our faith and the center of our village and community life in Iqrit. So I think it gave us this chance. But, you know, this is why the cases of Iqrit and Bir'am are special. We were lucky to still have this, you know, these main buildings still in the village to be a center of our resistance and struggle, unlike in other places and other villages that were completely demolished. But you know, we can always talk about new ideas of how other villages can sort of like, you know, start their own campaign, just like we did in Iqrit, and go back to their lands and reclaim their lands and
if it's still there
in general,
because many of them has also been, you know, taken as settlements, and new houses were built, and new people just Jewish communities just took over. So
that's true.
Yeah, definitely. But thank you for clarifying that, Amir. I think it's very important to also understand.
Sure. If I just might add something,
please.
We you know, the thing is that not only us believe that, you know, Iqrit and Bir'am give hope to other people from other villages do. And, you know, since we started the last movement in 2012, it really gave hope to a lot of people. Like we got the media, like the Palestinian media, coming every day to talk to us, like, oh my God, this is the first time that, like, you know, a new group of youth just decide to go back to their ancestral village and live in it because this is what they want and this is what return is, you know? So, like, at the same time, we did give hope to the youth group from Bir'am, from like our sister village. They also started living in their village after we started doing that. Like they started doing that a year after. You know, we were also able to go to other villages like Suhmata, which is also pretty close to Iqrit, and we helped them establish their first summer camp in the village, you know, to talk to their kids and, like, you know, educate their kids just like we did, because we also think that education was very important in our success at the same time. We also went on delegations and tours to other villages, and of course we, like, delegations from Iqrit and Bir'am, we also participated in the, you know, the Great March of Return that we have every Israeli Independence Day, so every Palestinian Nakba Day in 48. So, you know, a lot of people go, and we go as a delegation from Iqrit to show that, you know, we are still part of the people and part of the struggle for return for all of us.
Yeah.
So, you know, we were able to actually help. So I'm happy about that.
Yes. And how has Iqrit's story influenced, let's say, broader Palestinian activism and the whole global movement for justice and return? Like, do you see Iqrit as a model for other displaced communities? We already talked a little bit about this, but if we just take a look at the, you know, the broader global movement and the whole Palestinian activism issue, where do you think this issue stands, knowing that our struggles are many and very diverse?
Yeah. I think Iqrit is definitely a model for Palestinian return in general. But, you know, we have to put this in context of us being also in 48, like inside Israel proper. We actually have access to some of our lands. You know, we can actually go to Iqrit, like to our displaced village, and be there and organize and try to do everything that we can. You know, unlike like the rest of our people that are refugees outside of Palestine, they cannot actually return to their villages. But, we do believe that like our activism, our existence on the land, whatever we do, us just the most basic things, like us even like just planting trees around the church, I think it does give hope to other people, seeing us and being like, oh, like these people from this village, they actually went back. They can plant trees even though they are uprooted a week later, but it doesn't matter. It's about the principle. And they can try to rebuild homes, and they can continue community life and pray and eat and do whatever we were doing in our villages before we were displaced. I think that does give a lot of hope to people, and we still get messages like on our social media accounts of people, of Palestinians around the world, telling us that, wow, like this is great what you guys are doing, and we wish we could do the same. And we always extend a hand to our other communities. Like if Palestinians can actually visit Palestine, we always want to greet people in Iqrit and show them the village and show them what we do. Maybe they can do the same thing in their own communities if it's possible. So yeah, I think we do give hope, but we also get hope from our people at the same time. Like the support since since 48, but especially like since 2012, since we started like this youth movement, has been immense. And we could not have done, what we did, like actually living in the church in Iqrit without like the help and contributions of people, from simple basic visits to come and see how we are, to actually people contributing, to our stay and giving us food and supplies and even money, to make sure that we stay there and we continue whatever we did. So yeah, it's a relationship, like it's a connection that cannot be broken, between us and the broader, Palestinian people in general.
Yeah. And like you shared that the church in Iqrit is the one remaining physical structure of the village. So do you think this has a spiritual significance to the community? And if so, how does it serve as a symbol of hope and faith-driven activism? Like, we always like to separate between faith, religion, and our Palestinian cause in order to make sure it's as inclusive as possible for every Palestinian. But in this specific case of Iqrit, how would you describe that?
Well, the church in Iqrit, the Church of Our Lady, like it has been the center of our spiritual and community life in Iqrit even before 48, even before our displacement and the demolition of the village. Like it is physically located on top of the hill of the village on which the village resides. It was the tallest building in the village, and it is located at the center, surrounded by all the other buildings of the village, like the shops and houses and all of the structures. So it is where people met every week for Mass, and now this is the same place where we meet every month for Mass. And it's the center of our stay and activism on the land in general. Like, in addition to the connection to our Christian faith, through the church, church also symbolizes our strong connection, like to our land, like to the Holy Land, to Palestine in general, and our connection to our roots, actually, as like members of the oldest Christian community in the world. The people of Iqrit have always kept faith strong, and they trusted that everything will be okay at the end, and they will be permitted to return, rebuild their houses, and full liberation will follow after. And the church, I think, it sustains this faith that is the center of our lives, in the village. People come to pray. People believe that, the fact that the church is still standing, gives them the faith and hope that they will be able to return at some point. I mean, this is the Holy Land, and we are Christians from the Holy Land, and we know, like, hope never dies. Because Jesus was our neighbor. Jesus was from here. His disciples were from here. Like if I get into the car right now, it'll take me like half an hour to go to Tiberias or to Nazareth, from Iqrit. So I think the fact that the church is there, in terms of faith and in terms of spirituality is what really, gives us strength at some point, showing us that, at the end, after everything that happened, everything will be okay. And, we'll be able to redeem our lands and go back.
This episode is supported by Peace Catalyst International. Across the Divide has joined forces with Peace Catalyst International to amplify the pursuit of peace and explore the vital intersection of Christian faith and social justice in Palestine, Israel. Both Peace Catalyst and Across the Divide are committed to supporting Christians worldwide to move beyond apathy and into active solidarity, working together for a holistic and just peace for everyone in the land. By supporting this partnership, you can help elevate Palestinian voices and initiatives working for peace all over the world. Visit Peace Catalyst International's website to learn more about their work, and consider giving to them directly or supporting us through our page on the Peace Catalyst website. The link is available in the show notes. Together, we can equip Christians to begin following Jesus in this sacred and healing work for a just peace.
Talking about hope, despite everything, despite the political agenda, despite, understanding that the depth of the current situation. Recently, there was an incident during the whole bombardments with Hezbollah. If we can touch a little bit on that, and how did that incident, since it's recent, how did it either bring people together or showed other aspects of, any political tension or even implications of something? Because the news were you would hear and you would read all kind of different interpretations of the situation. But I think it's important to understand how people today, people from Iqrit, perceive and understand what happened and how you actually, even talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was pretty major incident. It happened in December 2023. And what happened is basically that a Hezbollah soldier, a Hezbollah militant from the other side of the Lebanese border, he shot a rocket or an RPG, I don't know what you even call it, onto the shed, which is a very small structure that we have in front of the church, because he saw that there was a movement of Israeli soldiers around the church. So he shot two rockets, and as a consequence of that, one of our elders of Iqrit, from the first generation, he got injured. But thank God he's okay now. He recovered, and he still has hope to return to Iqrit at some point. So Iqrit, since it's very close to the border with Lebanon, and and the village itself is on a hill, the main hill of Iqrit is considered to be a very strategic point for the Israeli military, the occupation army. So even in times of peace, I mean, I'm not going to call it peace, but relative calm on the border, Israeli soldiers would always come and look at the Lebanese border and look at Lebanon from our hill, because it's considered to be a strategic point. And during this war, after the resistance from Hezbollah started, in cooperation with the resistance in Gaza, the Israeli soldiers were coming up more to Iqrit, and the whole region of the Galilee in the north, adjacent to the border, it was a military closed area. Nobody could even go up there. So we could not even go to Iqrit at that time because of the war, because of everything that was happening. But the army could. So they would always be around the church, on the hill. They would attack from there. They would review maps there. They even had their own intelligence stations there for soldiers and for the army, just to help them out in their war efforts. So we can say, actually, at the same time, they use this argument a lot, but the fact that an attack was brought out against one of our structures in Iqrit, even if it wasn't the church itself, and we're thankful to God that it wasn't the church, but it was a structure next to it, it showed that the Israeli army sort of used our church as a shield, and used Iqrit as a shield and the village as a shield in general, because they did not really care for the building of the church to be there. If they did, the army would not have put their forces right next to the church, because they knew that they were at some point going to be attacked by Hezbollah. So the army was there. They used the church as a shield, and the Hezbollah fighters, they thought that one of our elders that was there, he was part of the army, so they decided to attack because they just saw an activity of the army up there. right after that, Israel started their own PR campaign of saying, you see what Hezbollah terrorists do. They attack churches and they attack other Arabs, and they don't really care. They're just terrorists. They want to kill everybody. But what we did as Iqritians, we came out in statements and we said, well, Israel is the one who displaced us. Israel is the occupation state. Israel is the one who demolished our village. So don't use our village and whatever happened in Iqrit as a tool in your PR campaign to normalize yourself and legitimize your existence and your occupation in general in all of Palestine. And people, started reacting to that, saying, listen to the people of the land. This is what we are actually saying. And yeah, it was a difficult incident because, naturally, you don't really know what's happening on the ground. Not a lot of people could go up to Iqrit, and everything that we heard about what happened in the attack was from the news, and mainly Israeli news. So we thought, oh my God, the church was demolished, or oh my God, we didn't know what happened. But thank God it turned out to be not a serious issue. Abu Nasser, our elder, is he's okay now. He's recovered. The structure in front of the church has been destroyed, but it's okay. We're going to rebuild that. As Palestinians, we always do that. You talked about sumud and steadfastness. And yeah, but the real thing to celebrate was actually the return to Iqrit, past last week or 2 weeks ago, when the ceasefire was decided between Hezbollah and Israel, because the area was open again and people could actually go up to the church and start renovating and start making sure that everything is okay up there. So we sort of went back to Iqrit in the last few weeks, which is another happy occasion.
Yeah, there are two things that I think it's hard not to acknowledge. First, the fact that people of Iqrit, even today, having 3 generations following the Nakba, they're still unified. Even the way that you mentioned, we Iqritians, we came together, we did this, and we wrote a statement. We made it clear that we are on the same page. And that is something that today, even with my own family, with my own siblings, it's hard to be on the same page most of the time. So that is something that I think is very important, of also how hardships, but also how hope really unites people. It unifies our main goal of focusing on what we really want to achieve. And I think that is something really very, very beautiful. Another thing is, and I want to talk a little bit more about the whole, legal battle as a pursuit of justice, but also everything you mentioned and all the, let's say, the methods that you've been taking are all focused on nonviolent resistance, and that is something very, very important. And I think it's important to stop there a little bit and discuss the different forms of nonviolent resistance since 1948 until today. You mentioned education, you mentioned camps, you mentioned the whole awareness, let's say, raising awareness campaigns, joining peaceful demonstrations, everything that has been going on, but also not giving up on the legal part of actually using the privilege of being a citizen to actually go to the court and do this and that. And it didn't stop in 1951. So that is something very important that I would really appreciate if you can take us, a little bit into that, discuss, any pivotal moments in Iqrit's legal struggle and how have they affected the community, let's say, sense of agency.
Yeah, sure. So, in our arguments, we always cite the 1951 ruling. But, our whole general struggle for return does not really necessarily rely on this. We were lucky to get that ruling and, we still talk about it a lot. But there were other pivotal moments, in the history of the village in general. And it's basically, the people themselves struggling. So, yeah, we talk about 1951, but at the end, even if 1951 was not given, we were going to struggle anyway and, demand to return to Iqrit. It doesn't matter what happens. But the ruling did give us, sort of a standing with the occupation government, because along the years, a lot of politicians, like, Zionist politicians, even from the right wing, they said, we have to accept the ruling. We have to respect the ruling. We have to bring these people back to their homes. So during these years, a lot of people from Iqrit, they were relying on that, and they were trying to get the support of these politicians, and actually returning to the village and trying to return to the village. Like in 1993, even, like, there was an Israeli ministerial committee that was established under the Rabin government that also suggested, bringing people back home. But, as you know, Rabin was assassinated 2 years later, and that process never really ended. But it's also important to note that, our right of return, like all Palestinians, does not rely on Israeli law or court rulings. We did use the court ruling in 1951, but it's not the sole basis of our right. We rely on UN Resolution 194, for example, that affirms all Palestinians have the right to return to their homes. And we also cite basic human rights, of course. But this is the main thing, like we did take advantage. We did not choose to become Israeli citizens. The Israeli ID was forced on the 48 Palestinians, the 150,000 Palestinians that stayed in Palestine after 48. But, we decided to use it. We went to the court, we got the ruling, and now we even have a ruling from the Israeli government, saying that the right of return is still to be respected at some point, if at least in Iqrit and Bir'am. But, this can be a start. So a lot of people, did rely on this. I personally don't really, believe that this will lead us anywhere soon, especially because, we're seeing the deterioration of Israeli governance in general, with the right wing being in power for a very long time. And now Israel is also becoming an autocracy, with them trying to, pass a lot of legal changes and controlling the media and all these kind of things. So I don't really believe this will happen soon, and the ruling will be implemented soon. But, it's a thing that we base our claims upon. So it's always going to be there. Doesn't matter what happens. But at the end, we will keep fighting and struggling, on the ground in nonviolent way, just like you said, by staying in Iqrit, by doing the summer camps, by focusing on education, while citing the ruling, but not really relying completely on it, because, our rights, they sort of like go beyond Israeli law, and they go beyond the Israeli court system, and we don't care when it comes to that, really. I hope I answered your question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you
Okay,
did.
good.
And how have the summer camps affect, let's say, the younger generation? So for the first generation, they are the ones that lived the Nakba. They are the ones that really, understand. For the second, it was still people who grew up in homes with parents who told them the stories, and who even, like, generational trauma is something real. Even now, we're third generation. We still feel it. We still, go through it. We still, like, even subconsciously, you go through things, and then you understand that, oh my God, that's just, generational trauma there. But focusing on education, on nonviolent resistance, and raising awareness among the younger generation, one of the ways was the summer camps. So how exactly, like, how does it work, and how do you see its impact on the ground?
So the summer camps were the first ones were established and organized in the 1990s, and they were established by the second generation. So you talked about generational trauma. If we talk about the first generation, a lot of members of the first generation, they had difficulties talking about what happened because of the trauma. Like, even my own grandparents from Iqrit, I tried to talk to them many times, like me and my brother and my cousins. And they would just refuse to tell us what happened, or they would refuse to talk about it because they don't want to talk about it. So things became better with the second generation, even though, a lot of the members of that generation as well were, afraid, and that they didn't want to get into politics. And it's also because their parents were telling them, like, stay away from these kind of things. You don't want to be in danger or in any kind of peril. But good thing that we had good members of the second generation that decided to establish these summer camps and educate the third and fourth generation. Now we have a fourth generation, which is crazy. But so what we do every year, usually in the summer camps, is that we go up to Iqrit for 4 or 5 days. We usually have a set agenda and a set schedule of what we're going to be doing in terms of educational activities and fun activities as well, and food and dinner and lunch and all these kind of things. We go up to Iqrit for 4 to 5 days, and all of us camp in tents around the church for this period in the summer usually. So it's kind of like an experience for us every summer where all of the village comes back to the village land itself, and they live there together. At least the kids, and at least the children. They live there for 4 or 5 days every summer until they go back to their homes, and then they come back the next year. So we usually have like during the summer camps, we usually have groups, of age, students. Sorry, I'm a TA at a university, so I always say students when I'm talking about kids or children. That's how I see them. But yeah, anyway. So the kids of the village, they're usually kids that are like from first grade to third grade. We put them together in one group, and we have instructors from like the second or third generation that come and talk to them, come give them these educational activities and talk to them about the village and whatever happens and everything. So it's a really unique experience. I used to go to the summer camps when I was a kid. I was educated in these summer camps. It was easy for my parents at least, to send me there. Even though it's in the middle of nowhere, like Iqrit is in the middle of forest. But like knowing that the other members of the community are there and they're the ones responsible, they're the ones who are managing everything and organizing everything, really makes their hearts calmer, which is a good thing. So yeah, so I used to go there as a kid. I got educated, and then as we grew up, we started becoming the instructors in the summer camp as well. So I became an instructor, and then I became a director at some point. That was like in 2012, after we decided to return to Iqrit, the third generation. It became easier to organize and manage events in Iqrit, while we were still living there, and it continued. In the last few years, we've had a few mishaps. There was COVID, so we could not actually get the kids up there. This year there was the war. So same thing, but we always go through difficult periods. But after that, we always come back to Iqrit because this is who we are. So I hope we can continue with the summer camps as like a very important tool of educating the kids and getting them to actually live on their lands for some time and understand things about the land and see the plants and learn about the plants and learn about their roots, where they come from, feel their actual home, their ancestral home, before they were displaced. And I think that was very important. In 2012, like when we started this movement, it was after the summer camp, yeah. So we were supposed to go back to our homes and leave Iqrit, but we just decided that we wanted to stay. Why would we leave? We just want to be here the whole year. I don't want to be here for only 4 or 5 days, So yeah, so it was also like a basis for us staying there and like continuing our activism.
Yeah, it is. It's truly amazing what you're doing and the impact locally. But thinking today, I think we all agree that international solidarity plays a role in struggles for justice. So how have international allies or global Christian communities, for example, supported Iqrit's cause? And what role do you think they should play moving forward? Like, has it been, in the news internationally? Do you feel that people are aware of the situation? Do you think that there has been an enough, let's say, solidarity from global communities, especially Christian ones? And how do we move forward from here?
I think we try to talk to the world, and especially the Christian world, more than we try to talk, to our occupiers and Israelis in general. And this has been a good thing. Like during the years, we received diplomats from many countries in Iqrit, who wanted to learn more about our case and about how Israel has not allowed us to return since 1948. Like the case of the displaced villages, and especially Iqrit and Biram, has been one of like the main cases, when talking about the inequality for Palestinian citizens of Israel. So people usually are interested, and they take Iqrit and Baram as like a very important case, when talking about that. So we try to reach out to diplomats and embassies and bring them to Iqrit, so they can understand more and they can report back to their home countries about what's going on. But we also try to connect a lot to like international, nonprofits and NGOs, so they can understand also more what's going on and see if they can help us in terms of funding or like other things. The case of Iqrit was cited in many reports of these NGOs, including the Amnesty International report from 2022, in which they designated the state of Israel as an apartheid state. Iqrit was brought as one of the cases, saying that you're taking Jewish settlers who are not from Palestine and you're giving them all these advantages and you're giving them all these benefits in order to settle, but you're not, letting the people of the land actually return. But also, like the Iqrit community, the Iqrit Community Association as well, which is like the body, governing our relations with the world, has been in formal contacts with the Vatican and the Archbishopric of our church, like the Greek Melkite Church in Haifa, to promote our cause and the return to the villages in general. So the thing is that we promote our cause not only as a Palestinian one, but also as a Christian one. Christians all over the region are under threat. This is one of the cases. So naturally, we want to bring attention to it, and of course, also connected to our national Palestinian plight of right of return. Talking about connections with the Vatican, a family from Iqrit met with Pope Francis on his trip to Palestine in 2014. And they talked to him about the case again. And one important moment from that meeting that this family told us is that when they said that Iqrit was destroyed was demolished on Christmas Eve, the Pope had an expression of disgust on his face, like how could this even happen? And they did that deliberately. So we've had talks with the Pope. We also received many letters, honestly, like from the government of the Holy See, like the actual government and the Secretary of State of the Holy See, affirming our demand to return and rebuild Iqrit. But of course, there needs to be more pressure from the churches themselves, and I think they have a lot of leverage when it comes to the Israeli government or like the occupation in general in Palestine. Like, this is the Holy Land. We are the Christians of the Holy Land, and we should be our priority, at least for the global churches, if that's the Orthodox Church or even the Catholic Church. But no, we've tried as much as we can, to establish these kind of relations with church officials and keep them official and try to make progress. Like the Maronite Patriarch of Lebanon, also like Cardinal Bashar al-Ra'i, he also visited Iqrit a few years ago. He came to Iqrit and he also came to Baram. Also, at the same time, we're always interviewed by Christian media outlets and international churches who have their own publications, about our story, as Palestinian Christians, especially in Iqrit. But also, this reminds me, in 2015, we also organized a tour from Iqrit, like a delegation from Iqrit. It was me and two more friends. We came to the US, and we were hosted by many churches, actually, to talk about our case and our story. And we also met with the World Council of Churches at the UN, and we told them our story at the same time. The World Council of Churches is sort of like the UN for churches. So they gave us the opportunity to talk to them and represent our community. We also were able to go to Congress and talk to Congress at some point. There was a congressional briefing that we spoke in. So there are like many opportunities for us to try to connect to the world, try to tell our story, and try to get the world also to do something, for us, for Christians in the Holy Land, and especially Palestinian Christians.
Yeah. Wow, that was a lot. I think this is also really very educational for most of our listeners. I want to thank you, Amir. For now, we still have our Patreon part, of course, for our Patreon supporters. Please go to Patreon to listen to the extended part with Amir, where we will talk about unseen aspects of activism, sacrifices, tensions, and the costs of pursuing justice and focusing on the youth. That will be our focus for the Patreon part. But as for now, I really want to thank you. Thank you for your time, for your wisdom, for sharing all of these information, and also hope with us, something that we really need these days. So thank you.
No, thank you for hosting me. Like it's really an honor to be on Across the Divide.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Across the Divide. We are so grateful for your support and interest. The hosts of this podcast are Daniel Bannoura, Jennifer Madrand, and myself, Abeer Shhali. Salim Anfous is our producer. Our theme music is composed by Charlie Rishmawi. To help sustain the work of this podcast, please consider becoming a financial supporter of Across the Divide. Any donation amount makes a difference, and with a donation of as little as $5 a month, you will gain access to exclusive supporter-only content. Go to patreon.com/acrossthedivide to learn more and donate. For any feedback or suggestions, connect with us on Instagram at Across the Divide Podcast. Until next time, stay curious, stay passionate, stay engaged, and join us again on Across the Divide.